Hey, CDA, and welcome back to Dyson Sphere Program. This is episode 28 of our Super Proliferation run, and we have really gotten to the super part now. We have actually made a very nice kind of base facility over here where we reused all of our blueprints, set up a lot of base production. Last time we also created the build for antimatter over here, and it's also using these awesome looking power towers. And quite honestly, this kind of made me decide I want to do everything completely different. Yeah, like I said, I reserved the right to change my mind, and I really like optimizing stuff in these games. So if you let me think for too long, especially when you have all the availability for pretty much everything you want to do in the game, you can get really creative with stuff. So and actually this was triggered by you guys, so I'm gonna go and blame you and not take any responsibility myself. No, just kidding, of course. So what I was thinking is actually a couple of you made comments around me building solar panels a few episodes ago, and basically were like, hey TDA, when you get to the end game, you're starting to build Dyson spheres and things like that. Things get really inefficient really fast, and that's also part of the reasons why we built this antimatter production, because we also want to be building solar, I'm sorry, artificial suns from now, which is a lot more efficient in terms of how many buildings you need to get all your power up and running on your planets than it is to use solar panels. Now, taking that one step further, it would actually make sense to kind of redo a lot of our base production as well. So over the next few episodes, I am actually going to focus on doing exactly that. So I'm basically trying to give you some builds that will allow you to pretty much redo your whole entire economy, maybe even, depending on, of course, how far you want to take it, while being as efficient as you can in terms of how much that will actually draw power from your game. Now, I do have to warn you, that is not for the faint-hearted, because that will actually mean you will have to redo a lot of your builds so far. Because of course, at the first maybe 5 or 10 or even 20 hours of the game, you are not focused on that at all. You're building your stuff because you need to progress in the game. In my case, I've been in this playthrough for almost 100 hours now. Of course, that's mainly because I'm also making your content and stuff like that, so things take longer than usual. But still, at this point in the game, you might want to optimize what you're doing in such a way that you can actually get as far as you can in the game without your PC or laptop or whatever you're playing on collapsing on you or starting to get on fire and stuff like that. So that is what we're going to do over the next few episodes. In this episode, we're actually going to keep it fairly simple. So let's go and do that. Okay, so the first thing we are going to do is we're actually kind of going to hack our previous build. So what we want to do is we want to actually make use of the fact that you're at this point probably producing more of these spheres than you actually need. So I'm actually stuck here on the belt. There we go. So what you can do, in my case, I already produced 14k of these antimatter fuel rods. So you should probably limit this, by the way. So I actually already set down the limit, but yeah, I have plenty of those. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to remove the warpers from here. I'm actually going to set the spheres to go in here, and then this belt, I continued this belt just before I started the recording, by the way, so just in case you're wondering where it came from, just have this belt continue on. So this will mean that whenever you are actually producing antimatter fuel rods, the spheres will go in there first, but if you have a surplus like we have right now, you have a place to get some of these spheres. Now I actually already produced a few extras, so we can put those in. And in order to make sure this building is actually still working, what you then also need to do is you need to make a little belt from the other ILS and make sure you have the warpers enabled on your belt. And then this should be just a very nice and easy quick belt straight into this ILS. And what that will do is this will make sure that there's actually warpers going from this ILS into this ILS without a specific slot being assigned to that. So everything's still working like intended, but now we have access to a annihilation constraint sphere, or 300 if we need them. Now the next step in our little side quest here is actually to build a very quite little but straightforward build. We are going to place an ILS over here. I think we're also going to place an ILS round about over here. And then we should have enough room to place one more. Let's make sure it actually fits. And that should be over here. Now, what are we going to do with those? Let's flip the view around a little bit. We are going to be making 2 items in here. So let's start with this one. We are going to be making the artificial suns, but we're also going to be making plane smelters here. And we haven't actually used plane smelters in this playthrough at all. As far as I remember, we haven't actually used plane smelters in any of my playthroughs on this channel so far. And plane smelters are key if you want to optimize your endgame production. Why? They are basically twice as fast as an arc smelter. And that means you need only half the amount of buildings in order to do the same amount of work. So it makes sense to make plane smelters. They do cost unipolar magnets. That's the far right input you see here in the recipe. And that is a rare item. So you do need to make sure you have those. Otherwise, this will not actually be building. But I'll get to that in a moment. Now, we definitely do not want 14,000 of these, so I do highly suggest you limit this. But in case of the plane smelters, do limit it to a relatively high amount. As long as this build is working, you want it to keep working. The artificial suns, on the other hand, not so much. So a few hundred of those should be more than enough. Now, we are going to need quite a few resources in order to make those artificial suns. So as you can see, we'll need alloy, we'll need frames, so let's queue all of that up. So we're going to need alloy, frames, where are you? Hello, autosave. The autosave is actually starting to take quite a while as well, considering how much stuff there is in my playthrough. We're going to need the spheres. What's the last one we need? We are going to need the quantum chips. Now, of course, we are going to remove this, and then we're going to implement this one. And of course, remember not to set your resource requests too high. Even 1500 it might actually be too high. The reason that you don't want to set this too high is that, again, storage is something that will slow your game down. So let's actually just set this to 1000. That should be more than enough for what we're trying to build here at the speed that we're going to be building it. All right, that's one half done. Now, of course, we also need the plane smelters in order to have that work. We're once again going to need the frames, but we're also going to need a few other things. So let's see. We are going to have plane smelters. We are going to need the Mark 1 smelters. So we're going to have to request those. We have to go and request the plane filters. And we have to request the unipolar magnets. I was about to say, I actually don't know where those are. And then last but not least, we are going to need proliferators. Of course, what else? We are also going to have some space warpers in here. So once again, we're going to have to set this up. A fair amount of these are probably going to be useful to have as an input. But once again, make sure you limit this. Now keep in mind that the unipolar magnets are actually used in quite large quantities. And they will probably also be coming from quite far away. So what you might want to do is actually stack this up a little higher. The proliferators specifically, of course, can be at a very low amount. All right, there we go. Now, what are we going to do? We are going to make some very straightforward builds here. We are going to be making some of these. Let's see. We're going to want to build a few more plane smelters, I think, than we necessarily want to be making artificial suns. So let's do it like this, actually. So these are going to be making the plane smelters. We are, of course, going to proliferate all of that. So let's take those out. And then we are simply going to have to put in all the required materials. Now you do need to make sure that you can actually reach for everything. And I just realized I actually misaligned this slightly. So let's have these buildings come a little bit to the front. So we have a little bit closer and we don't have to rearrange those belts. Same holds for these. Let's make sure we align this with where we want them to go. Just 2 of these will be fine, I think. And remember that the frames are actually going to go into both of these builds. So that one can go like that. Then we're going to have, let's say, the spheres here. And what else? The alloy. There we go. And then we do need to make sure we have the other inputs here as well. So what is left? The quantum processors on this side. And then on this side, we of course have a few more things to do. We're going to have not those, that was actually the one we already had. This one. There we go. And then we only have left a few outgoing belts. So 1 for the plane smelters, as well as 1 for the artificial suns. Now you don't actually need to spray the outgoing ones. Spraying buildings doesn't actually do anything, so I don't recommend doing so. As far as I know, it doesn't do anything. If you do think it actually does anything, let me know. But as long as you're not reusing that building and any other items, there should be no effect that I'm aware of, unless it got added in today's patch. But then it was not in the patch notes. There we go. First, what's this? A. B. A. B. Ah, I actually didn't notice that before. It's also new in the patch. I don't think it was actually in the patch notes, so there could be more things that we don't know of in the patch notes in that case. But that's actually really nice, because sometimes you don't realize that you're actually doing your sorters in reverse. Been there, done that. And some of you have actually pointed it out in some of my blueprints, so it's actually really useful to know that this is now in there. Yeah, I actually kind of like this. A, B. I can get used to this. A, B, A, B, A, B. This is really annoying for you to listen to maybe, but yeah, I kind of like it. Okay, and now we have a little build set up completely for this production of these things. Now, of course, I'm going to add in a few proliferators, and then let's see if we can get that production up and running. Now, if you've been paying attention for the last 27 episodes or so, you might have noticed that we haven't actually built a build for plane filters, because it is not actually used anywhere else as a resource to make any buildings other than the build we just made. So we are going to have to make a little build for plane filters. It's actually going to be a temporary build, but considering we want those plane smelters for real, yeah, we will definitely need to make this build happen before we can progress to the end stages that I just described before. So in order to do that, we are going to have to make a few pretty basic things. We are going to have to make some titanium. Let's make 7 titanium smelters like this. We are also going to need some glass smelters. Only 3 of them will do. Like I said, this is still using the Mark 1s, but this is only a temporary build. This is going to be the titanium, and this is going to be the glass. And 3 times, please. Please. Hello. There we go. And then we are also going to need to make titanium glass. Now, titanium glass is actually something that is a little bit harder to produce, and we're going to make that up here, I think. And hard is a relative term, because we only need about 13 smelters, but that's considerably more than what we have down there. And then last but definitely not least, we are going to need the actual plane filters. Now, the plane filters are going to be 20 of them, so we're going to be building 6, 10, and then we are going to have to build another row of 10 over here, and that's 20. Now I am actually going to figure out how to place these belts efficiently. I won't make you watch that, so we'll quickly jump to the end result. Okay, there we go. The build is done. I made a few silly mistakes when I was setting this up. I must be getting tired, so apologies for that. But of course we need 7 glass smelters, and we also don't make the titanium glass in smelter, we make that in an assembler. So just all of that, no major changes or anything like that. The belts are, I think, quite elegant. So we have all the inputs over here. We have 3 of these assemblers making titanium glass over here, so we could pretty much make a tiny little square build. And then everything is wrapping around over here. It's being proliferated, of course, as always. And then we have a couple of outgoing belts here for the actual plane filters in such a way that we have everything going in this ILS over here. Now, I'm not actually proliferating the outgoing plane filters because, of course, we just made the only build that is actually going to be using these plane filters, and that's the one for the plane smelters. And we are proliferating that right there over there. You could, of course, opt to also proliferate them over here. But in this case, because I'm 100% certain where everything is going, I did not opt to do that. I'm also starting to really like these satellite power towers, so probably going to have to use more of those. Once again, that is actually a good consideration for the end game, considering these things. As you can see, we only need 3 units to power this entire thing, and if we would have done this with normal power towers, we would have needed at least a dozen, maybe even closer to 2 dozen of those power towers to actually reach everywhere. So yeah, it's actually a lot more efficient. Now, there's other efficiency things you could do in a build like this as well, but like I said, this is going to be a temporary build, so just need this to actually start making plane smelters. Now, there's one more thing that we actually need in order to make plane smelters, and that is the unipolar magnet. So I figure that maybe not every one of you knows where to find them, so let's go and look for them, shall we? Alright, so this is our overview of the star map, and typically you will find your unipolar magnets in one of 2 places. First, they are usually around neutron stars. In this case, you can already see we have indeed unipolar magnets around our neutron star. The second place you will often find them is the other purple thingy on your map. That might be a black hole. Again, black holes usually have these things around them on one of the planets. I don't think I've ever had a playthrough where you'd have no unipolar magnets at all. But if we just click around at random, you will see that even all the other stars on the outside of our galaxy still do not have any unipolar magnets. So you will typically only find them in a few systems. So despite the fact that there's probably going to be plenty in that system, nothing to panic about. Make sure that you're using them for your plane smelters and not for the rare recipe where you can also use them for. It's really not needed. Just make sure you use them for your plane smelters and you will not have to worry about not having enough unipolar magnets ever. Unless, of course, you're playing on a certain setting with extremely low materials, and that's probably be a bit far-fetched, but you could get into a scenario where you do have, for example, a neutron star or a black hole, but it's very close to the center of your galaxy, and then by default you'll actually have less resources, because the farther out your systems are, the more resources you will find there. And that might mean you have a very low amount of those resources just because those stars spawned really close to the center of your universe. So again, don't panic. Even if you don't have any unipolar magnets in your playthrough, you can just do everything I'm doing with the normal smelters. But of course, we are talking about endgame now, so I'm going to assume that you have them from this point forward. I am going to place down some smelters on 1 of 2 of these planets, and then we will take it from there. There's actually one more thing that we should probably talk about, and I'll do that on set planet. Alright, here we are on this pretty awesome planet that has all these new ice formations that were added in the last patch. That's not really the reason that we're here, but it's a nice bonus, considering it was actually the first planet I visited. There's also somewhere in the sky, hopefully, a very awesome thing to look at, which is a black hole, which seems to disappear all the time because this planet is rotating so fast. I really lose track of the black hole all the time. Really. I just want to show this black hole to people. Come on. There we go. Ah, there it is. And like I said, this planet is rotating so fast, it's really hard to keep track of where the thing is. Anyway, so yeah, what did I do over here? Well, I actually was inspired by a few of the commenters on one of the previous episodes that were kind of shouting at me, hey TDA, if you're building all those solar panels, why are you not making use of your artificial suns? That's how you approach the end game. I mentioned this earlier in this episode as well, but I really want to actually take that to heart, and it kind of inspired me to make a few new episodes after we finish our science project, where we're actually going to do exactly that. So we're going to see if we can make a couple of builds where we're really trying to optimize our end game, kind of tearing out everything that we've done before, and yeah, really optimize the hell out of the game and see how far we can take the end game doing just that. Now, one of the people that was actually commenting exactly that and gave me that inspiration was the person I will name this system after. I do have to actually type correctly because apparently I suck at typing. But McLaughlin, I hope I pronounced that correctly, was the person that suggested to do exactly that. So here you go. Now we have a system name that we can actually pronounce, and it's not some boring number, but an awesome name instead. Now, how does this thing work, this dome I built here? It's kind of minimalistic, so there's only a couple of power stations in here, so these satellite substations are far more efficient in terms of how many buildings you need in order to power everything up, so we have a couple of those. We also have this ILS here in the middle that is requesting more ILSs, more miners, but these are all set to not request them by default. They are set to 100, so the only thing you have to do if you think, hey, I'm out of miners, just request them, they will start being flown in, and if you're done here, just put it back to supply. Same for the sun, so basically this is everything you actually need to get this dome going, just in case. The belt is actually pointing to the other ILS that is really important, that has all the other stuff you might need to actually mine a planet. So there's some foundations, there is substations that we're going to use instead of power poles now, and there is some pumping materials in case you have any liquids on your planet that you want to take care of. Now, last but not least, the one opposite to where the belt is pointing to has drones and vessels in it, so that you can actually make sure things get transported off your planet. Now, the other ILSs are only used to actually request items. Basically, this is a transport hub. So ores are being requested. We have a couple of them for liquids as well as rare materials. And all the rare materials, basically all the rare resources in the game are in these ILSs are being requested. And they should all be at least 1 or 2. And by doing so, you should have more than enough supply for your entire universe if you have just a few of these planets going on. Of course, if you have a very high amount of resources on the planet, or you really want to optimize your output on the planet, you can always build this thing at the other pole as well. But to be honest, I recommend just building one, and it should be more than enough. We actually have some more veins utilization going as well, so that's great. Now, there's one more thing I do need to show you, and that is how to actually power this thing up. Now, the way you can do that is just pick up one of those from the belt, put it in your artificial sun, and then boom, everything is powered up. We should see all our drones flying off as well. Yep, there they go. They have some minor amount of power now as the satellite substations come online. I actually already set up this mining facility, so I have everything set up here as well. And as you see, now we have everything up and running. Now, let's check on the power. This is actually supplying 2 gigawatts of power. Just this little ring of artificial suns. As you can see, we don't need anywhere close to that. But luckily, the artificial suns do take that into account, so that we are not wasting any resources here. So you don't have to worry about burning your precious antimatter faster than you can use it or anything like that. Yay, milestones. And yeah, so next episode will be all about science. We are going to make a pretty interesting build, I hope, for science. Wow, that sounds like the saying for science. Anyway, we're going to do exactly that. And then a few episodes after that, we are really trying to optimize our end game. Basically, we're going to build more science. We're also going to tear up some of the previous things we've done in order to try and keep our FPS under control. As you can see, I'm still fine, but I'm also in a system where there's not much going on. And typically speaking, you want as many systems where there's not as much going on, but you are producing stuff to the largest amount that you can muster. So I really hope you enjoyed this, guys. If you are watching this and you still haven't subscribed to this channel in, well, this is episode 28, consider doing so. At least make sure, if you enjoyed this episode, that you like it. Comment as well if you can. It really helps the algorithm actually find these episodes, so that is really helping me out there. And either way, I'm just very happy that you guys are here and hope to catch you in the next one.